Hey friends, it's Ryland from Rainsford Photography, where we are all about growing confidence for the creative entrepreneur. I'm out on location right now, just scouting for a photo shoot. As you can see, it's super bright, but this is perfect because today we're talking about light. You could say that photography is really all about using the available light that we have to create the exposure that we want. So a basic understanding of light is fundamental to accurately capturing the experiences that we have. So today we're going to talk about the 4 fundamentals of light. First, power and distance. Second, light sources. Third, size. And then fourth, contrast. Y'all ready? Let's jump in. First, power and distance. Let's think about an example. Imagine you're in your living room in the evening, reading under a lamp. Perfect, no problem, plenty of light to read the book you're trying to read. Now imagine you cross to the other side of the room and try to read your book by the light of that same lamp. Not quite the same. And the key thing to remember here is that light power doesn't travel very far. The sun is another great example. I mean, the sun is so big and powerful that if you were to get close to it, it would totally incinerate you. But because it's so far away, it just provides us with a nice warm light that like what I'm experiencing right now. So the key thing to remember here is that you want to try to use distance from your light source to your advantage. So our second point is about light sources. And really there are just 2 types. There's direct light and there's reflected light. So let's talk about the difference. First, direct light is far more powerful than reflected light. Since reflected light is really just direct light that's bounced off something. Imagine the sun shining directly on you versus the sunlight bouncing off of like a sidewalk or something and hitting your face. It's much different. Second, direct light is far more harsh than reflected light. Here's what I mean by that. Direct light creates much harsher lines of contrast between the highlights and the shadows on your subject. So imagine a star on a stage in a spotlight. That spotlight is super powerful and very direct, and so it creates very crisp, sharp lines of contrast on the subject. Contrast that with like where I am right now, where the only light source that I have right now is reflected light. The sun is way up there somewhere, but it's being reflected through the clouds and off of this concrete surface I'm standing on and off of the cars around me and off these buildings. And so I'm surrounded by millions of reflected light sources. And so the lines of contrast on my face, on me, are much softer. There's much less difference between the highlights and the shadows on me than if the sun was shining on my face right now, like this. Harsh, direct light, can't see. Our third point is size. So let's think about this for a second. The sun, like we talked about, is super direct and super bright, but it's also a really long way off, so it looks really small to us. However, when it bounces off of this parking lot that I'm standing on, off the clouds, off these cars, off these buildings, all of a sudden that pretty small direct light source becomes a million large reflected light sources. But not only does the size of those reflective light sources drastically increase, the power of that direct light as it reflects off the reflected sources drastically decreases. So our fourth fundamental is contrast, and this is really what brings it all together. Contrast is simply the difference between the highlights and the shadows on your subject. So if you can imagine, if you have a subject that has a lot of detail, like rings or flowers or other jewelry or things like that, you really want to bring out those details by utilizing a lot of contrast. And so direct light will really help you do that. On the other hand, if you're taking pictures of people don't have very sharp details. We have soft skin tones, we have soft curves on our faces and on our bodies, and so usually we want to use reflected light sources to complement the soft nature of a person as your subject. So let's run through a quick example of light sources. Right now, let me show you around. I'm out here on this parking garage, surrounded by this beautiful reflective light source, this entire sea of concrete. But now as I step into the stairwell, all of a sudden I go from a giant reflective light source to a much more singular, more direct light source being the doorway to the stairwell. And so you can see that more singular light source creates a much more defined highlights and shadows on my face than it did out in the parking deck where I just had reflected light everywhere. I hope that this has been helpful. Remember, the 4 fundamentals of light are power and distance, light sources, size, and finally contrast, which brings it all together. This video was totally meant to help grow you and your confidence as a photographer by giving you some practical skills and tips and things to think about. If you liked this video, please subscribe to our channel. It's free for you and super valuable for us so that you can be on the lookout and be the first to know about more great videos like this coming soon. All right, thanks friends. See you next time.